Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In today's video I'm looking at the ongoing chaos that there has been around the electing of a Speaker for the House of Representatives. It has been a long ongoing kind of saga with many ins and outs and candidates appearing and disappearing. So I thought it was something that was well worth putting a video together on and reflecting on, because it helps us in looking at lots of different aspects of the A-level politics course. So there's a rich range of examples of things that we can pull out of all of this in multiple areas, such as the workings of Congress, the workings of parties, the key factions within the parties, particularly the key factions within the Republican Party and the current divides within the Republican Party, and also it touches on some key elements of the Constitution as well. So lots of lovely stuff that you could use in a multitude of different essays that you might be writing in class or in those final exams. Now, the Speaker of the House is the presiding officer of the House of Representatives, and in effect, really the majority leader. There is also a majority leader, but they kind of outrank them, and they tend therefore to drive the agenda for House business. They're also second in line to the presidency after the vice president, and this has been the most important thing about the whole set of circumstances and general chaos that's been going on, where we've not had a kind of properly selected Speaker in the House of Representatives in the US for a long period of time, is that the House cannot properly function without a Speaker. And this is really important because it can't deal with new legislation, and there's lots of big stuff that needs dealing with, and there is also the ongoing threat of kind of federal shutdown if budgets aren't agreed, etc., over the next few months. So this is a really big deal. It started with, first of all, the election and then removal of Kevin McCarthy. So the Republicans won control of the House in the 22 midterms. They didn't win it by as much as people expected. They talked about the red tsunami or the big red wave, and it was more of the red trickle, I think, rather than that. So they won the House by narrow margin, 222 to 213 seats. So they needed to show real unity in choosing a Speaker. They didn't. Now, the right wing of the Republican Party, or the extreme right wing of the Republican Party, there is the Freedom Caucus. Now, they opposed the selection of McCarthy, although given the kind of former positions he's held as majority leader and minority leader, he seemed the obvious choice. They saw him as being not conservative enough and being a member of the in kind of quotes establishment. And although he had backed Trump, his support wasn't seen as being wholehearted or genuine enough, and kind of key figures in the Freedom Caucus were very outspoken against him. So people like Matt Gaetz, Andy Biggs, Matt Rosendale, Ralph Norman, Bob Good, Lauren Boebert, and they opposed McCarthy's selection, Gates describing him as the biggest alligator in the swamp, and kind of typical of the MAGA kind of terminology you see about Washington. They refer to it as the swamp. You often will hear Trump talking about draining the swamp as one of the things that they chant at Trump rallies, and it's an idea pushed by the likes of Matt Gaetz a lot. Now, during the series of votes we had, the Democrats voted solidly for Hakeem Jeffries, and essentially could sit back, point and laugh at the general chaos within the Republican Party. It took 15 votes before McCarthy was elected. This is the most that has been required to elect a Speaker since 1859 to 1860. Now, you should really bear in mind that in 1861 America plunged into a civil war. So this is pretty extreme. To get the votes, McCarthy had to make concessions to the right-wing Freedom Caucus members, and one of the key kind of concessions he's made would make it easier for someone to challenge and remove him in the future. Obviously, this is something he's going to live to regret, as Mark Gates would come back and get him removed. So McCarthy kind of then presses on as Speaker. We could see this clear division emerging in the Republican Party before the kind of very strongly pro-Trump MAGA Republicans and the more moderate Republicans who kind of, although not in many cases openly opposing Trump, kind of, I think, kind of wishing he'd go away, or at least the more extreme elements of what he wanted and pushing to kind of to fade. The Freedom Caucus in particular wanted radical change such as term limits in Congress, as having a very kind of right-wing policy agenda on abortion, guns, immigration, tax and spending. So it's the Freedom Caucus that the members you hear particularly talking about the idea of culture war in America, and they refuse to engage in any bipartisanship and will essentially hound and name call any Republican who shows the slightest interest or inclination to work with the other side. They expect all the Republicans to show complete and undying support for Trump and seek to remove any Republicans who shows any dissent to any part of Trump's messaging or claims, labelling them as rhinos, Republicans in name only. Now, the right-wing MAGA movement seems to have taken hold of the party grassroots, and in that it seems almost impossible, really, for many Republican representatives to stand really in its way very strongly, because they will face challenges in primaries. They will face difficulties in getting reselected. They'll face trouble raising funds for upcoming elections. But although the diehards of the Republican Party love Trump and the MAGA movement is very strong, it is less clear of its broader appeal to the broader electorate, and some commentators have hinted at this being demonstrated by the weaker than expected showing of the Republican Party in the 2022 midterms, in particular the failure of many kind of Trump-backed candidates. And this struggle within the Republican Party and the struggle for the right wing, the groups like the Freedom Caucus and the MAGA movement to take control of the party away from traditional Republicans is really demonstrated by the fight over the speakership. And we'll see the two sides kind of haven't got quite the ability to just win over the other side, but they have got the ability to block and frustrate the other side, and we see a great deal of that. Remember, so the Freedom Caucus, it's just 8 Republicans essentially who brought down McCarthy. So why did they do it? Well, McCarthy had managed to get a last-minute spending bill through Congress with the support of Democrats to prevent a government shutdown. Well, you might go, well, good for him. This seems like a good example of Congress actually working. Despite the divided government, it's a sign, if we go back to the kind of key concepts we looked at in the Constitution, of bipartisanship, and you go, well, this is bipartisanship working. However, this isn't how the right wing of the Republican Party saw it. Matt Gaetz already mentioned an opponent of McCarthy right from the start vowed to remove him. He then filed this motion to vacate, which he could do as a single representative, because of the concessions McCarthy had early made. Now, he voted against McCarthy's budget. He was demanding very heavy spending cuts, as well as ending military aid to the Ukraine. The motion to vacate was introduced on the 3rd of October and passed 216 to 210. 8 Republicans voted alongside the Democrats to remove McCarthy. Again, the Democrats generally seem to be enjoying watching the other party infighting. This is the first time ever that a speaker had been removed from office by a vote in the House in American political history. So again, it's a really big deal. Now, McCarthy had made concessions to the far right of the party, including starting an impeachment inquiry into Biden, but he in fighting his position, was very scathing of his opponents. He says, if someone wants to remove me because I want to be the adult in the room, go ahead and try. Well, they did, and they succeeded. So McCarthy, as a former majority leader and former minority leader of the party, He had been Trump supporter since 2016, but described his actions on January the 6th as atrocious and totally wrong. He also attacked the comments of other right-wing Republicans, and these events created animosity between him and the Freedom Caucus. And so in that way, his card was kind of marked. And this with the concessions he's made, through the frustration of the 15 votes it took to get him elected, left him highly vulnerable. Now, with there being no speaker, there needed to be a kind of temporary speaker in place. Now, Patrick McHenry became the speaker pro tempore, and there's no official limit to how long his term would be in this temporary position, but his powers were significantly restricted. There could be no new business until the new speaker was chosen. Now, there was suggestions that this could be reviewed and changed as the search for a viable speaker kind of dragged on, and there was some suggestion that maybe the Democrats would be willing to listen. But I think as soon as there's any hint that the Democrats might be willing to support a Republican, then the right of the Republican Party didn't want that Republican anymore. It was clear, because he'd been named as his successor by McCarthy, that McHenry would not get enough support within the Republican Party to get the permanent job. So we needed an alternative. So we then go through a series of failed attempts. Steve Scalise had been the House Majority Leader and was the House Majority Whip, therefore closely associated with McCarthy. He was elected by the House to stand for Speaker. Now, the Republicans had a vote within their own caucus, so they had a vote, and it went 113 to Steve Scalise and 99 to Jim Jordan. So we can see quite how divided the Republicans are on this. He arguably has very kind of strong conservative credentials. So he's given an A+, I think, by the NRA. He's seen as being kind of very much pro-gun rights. There's his voting and some of his speeches show that he's very much against the advancement of LGBT rights. However, it soon became clear that the right wing of the party would not accept him as Speaker, largely because of his association with McCarthy. And again, he wasn't seen as being kind of Trump enough, MAGA enough for the likes of the Freedom Caucus. And he was seen as being too much, again, a member of the old guard of the establishment. So what we can see here is the Freedom Caucus is really trying to shake the Republican Party up. And it is using the fact that there is such a small majority in the House of the Republicans to wield a great deal of power. Now, again, this can be seen, and is seen by political commentators, it's almost like the tail wagging the dog. If the Republicans had a big majority in the House, then a group of kind of the far right Freedom Caucus standing against someone like McCarthy or Scalise wouldn't really matter, because there would be enough weight of other Republicans who would back them. But because the hold on power in the House is so narrow, then you don't need a huge number of votes to obstruct and block and prevent. This is, again, if we look at the Constitution and the way that America works, this is one of the problems, that you have to be able to get consensus to get things through. And because we're in this period of such highly partisan politics, the Democrats are unlikely to lend a hand and are likely to watch the Republican Party scrum. Again, we're about a year away from the next presidential election, next congressional election, and this is likely to be doing damage to the Republican Party. So Scalise wins the vote within the Republican Party, but can't get enough support to win in the House, and so rather than going to loads and loads of votes in the House, he steps aside. So Jim Jordan becomes the next pick. So this would seem that this is going to appease the Freedom Caucus, because you've got this bombastic right-wing figure in the Republican Party who is now going to go and stand. He is a member of the Freedom Caucus. He's a very outspoken ally and supporter of Trump. He defended Trump in his second impeachment trial, and he gains Trump's ringing endorsement. However, this time the more moderate side of the Republican Party refuses to play ball, because it looks like we've had a tiny minority group within the party who've managed to get rid of McCarthy, They then refused to accept a kind of more moderate or centre of the party pick to replace him, and now they just want their own guy. And I think at this point, a load of the moderates in the Republican Party went, no, hang on a minute, we're not having the Freedom Caucus dictating everything to us. They're essentially just disrupting and destroying. We're not then going to reward them by letting them have the speaker of their choice. The attempts to make Jim Jordan speaker became very heated. Those who opposed him, such as Marinetta Miller Meeks, claimed that they received threats, including death threats, from those threats for opposing Jim Jordan's election. Jordan, it must be said, condemned these threats and those making them. But opposition grew rather than waned as the votes for Jim Jordan in the House went through. So 20 Republicans went against him in the first. It became 22 in the second and 25 in the third. So remember, it was 8 that got rid of McCarthy. So we can see that we're now in a worse position than we started. So McCarthy was taken out by a very small number. We then have Scalise, who doesn't even get to a vote in the House. Jordan gets through 3 and is getting progressively further away. There's then a secret ballot amongst the House Republicans in a basement meeting, and they voted that Jordan should no longer be their candidate for Speaker, and so his chances to become Speaker were over. We now swing back the other way and go, right, when Freedom Caucus aren't getting their way, we aren't having someone on the extreme right of the party, so let's look in a different direction. And the direction they look is towards Tom Emmer. So Tom Emmer of Minnesota was picked by his fellow Republicans in the House. He could be seen as a moderate. He voted to certify Biden's victory in 2020. But then a figure outside the House comes wading in, despite saying he'd stay out of it, and Donald Trump quickly attacks Tom Emmer as a rhino, so Republican in name only, calls him a globalist and not a supporter of MAGA, and he said his election would be a tragic mistake. So the Trump endorsement had not been enough to get Jim Jordan over the line, and we saw actually Jim Jordan's level of support amongst House Republicans went down rather than up during that. The Trump attacking Emmer was enough to get the MAGA kind of group on board, and that's just we've seen the Freedom Caucus were enough to get rid of McCarthy and to block Scalise. They could also clearly scupper Emmer, and Emmer, seeing that he couldn't possibly win, stood aside. So we've got the two factions in the Republican Party, the extreme end in the Freedom Caucus and then the more moderate Republicans, blocking each other. The Democrats sit back and watch, and everyone kind of wonders, when are we going to have a functioning Congress again? Again, all of this is really good for showing faction. It's really good at showing kind of the problems within Congress. It's really good for that, demonstrating the difficulty with gridlock. And again, any kind of question about whether Congress is no longer fit for purpose, all this stuff would be absolutely perfect kind of bang up to date examples to use, because it really does show how it fails to function. Again, maybe questions on the Republican Party as well, it would be really helpful for. So we then finally get a speaker. So Mike Johnson is another kind of member on the far right of the Republican Party, though less bombastic, more softly spoken, not necessarily less extreme in his views, but less extreme in the way that he presents them than the likes of Jim Jordan or a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Matt Gaetz or any some of those other candidates that you'll see quite frequently given lots of airtime. He was finally elected after 3 rounds of voting in the Republican Party, and then went on and won the vote in the House. So again, we can see that the Republican Party, it's not as if they were fully united behind him immediately. There's again another process where it takes time. Johnson is the former chair of the highly conservative Republican Study Committee, which is another important faction within the Republican Party. And again, as I said, his views aren't moderate. It's not like they've moved to the middle of the party. So he backs the national ban on abortion. He backs Trump's claims about the 2020 election. But he seems to have avoided the opposition that Jim Jordan faced from the more moderate members of the party. And again, it might be, and it was a moment of anger in terms of just trying to kick back against the Freedom Caucus and show them they couldn't just have what they wanted. It might be because he is seen as a quote here is he's just a nicer guy, and therefore he's kind of well liked. He gets on with a broader range of Republicans, even if he isn't necessarily ideologically in line with the more moderate groups. Or it might simply have been that at the end of this, the Republican Party simply got fed up with the endless debating and voting, and they wanted to actually get on with some proper work and voting, debating things against the Democrats, because this is what we've had here. Really, it is a long period of the Republicans fighting each other. At which point they aren't fighting the Democrats, and essentially this window where the Republicans control the House, the time is running out. There's a year left till the next election, and it might well be, and particularly in light of this, that the Republican chances of keeping hold of the House diminish somewhat. So if they're going to carry out actions, if they're going to do things like trying to impeach Biden and stuff like that, they're going to have to get on with it. Whether they're going to get through, how Mike Johnson's going to act in terms of getting budgets through, is something that we're going to have to wait and see. But there is a hope that maybe with Mike Johnson, as opposed to someone like Jim Jordan, there's a great chance of building a wider consensus. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that has proved helpful and given you a bit of an insight of what's going on, and maybe some examples and stuff that you can use in your essays and other works. If you haven't subscribed already, then please do so. There is a comprehensive coverage of US politics and components 1 and 2, the UK politics and UK government, as well as the ideologies. So we do liberalism, conservatism, socialism and nationalism as the ideologies, and all of that's covered on the channel. I know it's called Alan History Nerd, but there's lots of politics on there. There is also lots of history, so if you're studying history or just interested in history, there's lots of UK, US, Russian, all kinds of different history stuff on there, even some ancient stuff. So lots to have a look at. Any questions or comments, then please stick them below. Thank you very much for watching.